For conservation to be impactful and long lasting, it needs to be selfless. You can't do it, whatever entity you are, you can't do it alone. You have to have partners.
Welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. I'm your host, Byron Pace, and this is episode 222 and a Modern Huntsman production. I have not one, not two, but three guests on the show today. Tyler Sharp, editor-in-chief of Modern Huntsman, joins me in conversation with David Yoskowitz, the executive director of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and Katie Spurgin, the engagement officer of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, to discuss their role in conservation, land use, and recreation. And while this may be Texas-centric, there are some fascinating takeaways which are applicable anywhere in the world, as we delve into how to protect our wild spaces while also making them accessible for everyone. This episode is an extension of a story that we ran in Volume 10 of Modern Huntsman, presented by Tecovas, all about Stewards of the Wild, which is a program run by the Foundation, and you're going to hear more about that shortly. If you want to read the online article, head over to Modern Huntsman or click the link in the description. There are a handful of other stories presented by Tecovas on the website, which you can read as well. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Tecovas are most famous for their cowboy boots, but also have a growing range of awesome clothing. They are my daily boot at home, even here in Scotland, and Tyler kindly keeps my second pair in Texas for whenever I'm visiting, and so I don't have to carry them across the ocean. So we're going to dive into that brilliant conversation just shortly, but two quick things. First up, a thank you to my top-tier Patreon supporters this month, who include Richard McNeil, Ronnie Speakman of RD Contracting, James Marchington, the guys at South Esher Stalking, Dick Ekström, Mark Zabrowski, and Leslie Cumming. And just because why not, also a shout-out to the Conservation Hero tier members, who are Ellen Freeman, Matthew Nibb, Jens Haig, and Pat May. Thank you so much to all of your support and everyone else who's a supporter as well. If you would like to help support making these shows possible, head over to patreon.com/Byron Pace. And the last thing is I just released a new trailer for my upcoming feature documentary called Paid in Blood. It is on my website now. Head over to byronpace.com, and on the left-hand side you will find films. And in films, you'll find Paid in Blood and all the information, along with two trailers. So a new teaser that was just released, along with the original fundraiser trailer is there as well. We still have some money to raise for post-production. So if you would like to help bring that film into the reality, and we're pushing on now. The main edit is done. I'm flying down to Bristol next week to sit with a finishing editor for 3 weeks. And then we've got to push it on to sound, and then sound design, and then coloring. But we still got some funds to raise to pay for all of that post-production that is happening. So you can also click, I'll also have a link for it in the description. So head over, read about the film if you haven't heard me talk about it on the podcast before, watch the trailers, and any support is most welcome. Katie, David, Tyler, welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. It's great to have so many people on the show. It's so often just me and one other person. So this is going to be fresh. Maybe we could start off just so that everybody can work out who everyone is. Just saying who you are. I mean, people are bored of Tyler because he's on the podcast all the time. But just say who you are and what your kind of title and position is. Tyler, we kick off with you since people know who you are already, probably.
Yeah, I think so. But, I don't think everybody knows that I've been promoted to head dishwasher. So that's a big update in my life. But yeah, David, if you could introduce yourself, we'd kick it off.
Sure. I'm David Yoskowitz, the executive director of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and head dishwasher.
Nice. How are you, Katie?
And I'm Katie Spurgin. I'm the engagement manager for Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation. No dishwashing involved.
Tyler, maybe a good place to kick this off is just to give a bit of background about how you became the only reason I know about, the original reason I know about Texas Parks and Wildlife is through you and I first met, and because of stories that have run in Modern Huntsman. So what was your early engagement with that, apart from the fact that you're from Texas? And then we can feed into where we are today and the stories that we're running and what it all means and what they do and what everybody does.
Absolutely. So it all traces back to the very enthusiastic and dedicated Phil Lamb. And Phil works with Katie at the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation. And that's how I was kind of introduced to the work that they do in the state, which is my home state. And met Annie Brown, who's the executive director of the foundation. And, we kind of dove into, the nuanced background of how the department and the foundation work together. And obviously David's going to go a little bit more into the department, but that has more to do with the state parks and the game wardens and the management of the wildlife resources. And the foundation exists to fundraise and help support, those programs. And Katie's going to get more into the Stewards of the Wild, but that's a young group of professionals focused on the outdoors and hunting and fishing. I'm a member of Stewards of the Wild, and it's just there's just an incredible community and group of people involved in both organizations. And I've been pretty fortunate to develop friendships with a handful of people. And I think that obviously most Texans have a lot of state pride, but then to actually get to know some names and faces of the people who are actually focused on preserving these wild places and wild things is extra rewarding. And so I think it's kind of a passion for me to try to do whatever we can to be a microphone to some of those things. And that's sort of led to some of the storytelling we've done, Byron, with the podcasts and some of the publication stories and the short films that we're now working on, and stuff like that. So that's kind of the segue.
So David, Texas Parks and Wildlife and the department and your role there, can you expand on that so that people can understand what the organization does and what you're spearheading there?
Yeah, it is a very unique model. There's really only a handful of other states in the United States that have both under one entity, one agency, the state parks, as well as the fish and wildlife aspects of management. And I think that, for us in Texas, that's a great opportunity because quite honestly, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of opportunity when you have that, that combination of parks and wildlife under one umbrella. And an example of that is obviously we have a lot of angling that happens within our state parks. We have a lot of science that happens within our state parks, but we also have hunting opportunities that happen within our state parks. So bringing that all under one agency just creates great opportunity. It's also, in addition, we have game wardens in each of the 254 counties around the state. It's a huge and diverse landscape, everything from the Trans-Pecos of far west Texas, where it's arid desert and sky islands, and then down to the piney woods of southeast Texas, where it's timber, piney timber, and to the Gulf Coast, and where we have great recreational opportunities for fishing, boating, birding. So for me, coming into this position and my background, Byron, this ought to resonate with you a little bit, is as an economist, and I know that's your background as well.
Yes.
There's a few of us out there, but
it's a much more interesting transition doing what you're doing now from pure economics. But it's important, like as I'm sure we'll probably get into, like the economics of actually making all this stuff work for landscape scale conservation is incredibly important. Whether we like it or not, a lot of it comes back to money.
It does. And so, my background's in environmental and natural resource economics, which I got at Texas Tech University in my PhD and master's. So it does come back to, as you were saying, Byron, elucidating the value of conservation. And when I say that, sometimes it could have a dollar sign or a euro or yen or whatever it might be in front of it, but also value can be expressed in many other ways. And I think we'll probably dig into that later. So also getting back to your original point, we're a department that has a little over 3,000 individuals that their mission is for managing and conserving our natural and cultural resources for the state, which includes, providing opportunities around hunting, fishing, and recreation. And that's with this size state, that's a large task. We have really well dedicated individuals I'm proud to work with.
I like that the combination of natural and cultural resources together as being something that is preserved, because that's very encompassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're working on Byron's cultural Texas education. He's gotten good intros. I've toured him around the state as much as I can. He actually we were in Big Bend for a week back in November, so he got to witness that whole ecosystem, which was amazing.
What a mind! So when you said Sky Islands, I knew what you were talking about. But yeah, what an incredible place. So the kind of from a conservation standpoint, what kind of projects, what kind of things does Texas Parks and Wildlife, the department, get involved in, and how do you facilitate them?
Yeah, so Texas is 93 to 95% privately owned, right? So conservation work by necessity must involve the private landowners within the state. And there are a lot of private landowners that are dedicated to conserving, the natural and cultural resources. And so finding those opportunities is not that difficult. Funding those opportunities can be a challenge, and that's why Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation is such an important partner, along with many others, in helping to realize opportunities of moving private lands voluntarily into wildlife management areas or state parks or state natural areas, or even just conservation easements where the landowner wants to continue to work the land, but going forward wants to make sure that the land stays as it is for generations to come. So it's really about partnerships. One of the things that I've been sharing lately, and this is wouldn't be of any news to you and your listeners, is that for conservation to be impactful and long lasting, it needs to be selfless. You can't do it, whatever entity you are, you can't do it alone. You have to have partners. And so the partnerships with the private landowners, the foundation, as we've talked about, and other environmental natural resource NGOs are what make, doing our job successful. And so that's in Texas, that's what conservation looks like, is it's built around partnerships.
So the relationship between with the foundation, is the foundation the fundraising arm of Texas Parks and Wildlife? Is that basically how it's set up?
Yes. The foundation is the official nonprofit arm of the department, and we raise private philanthropy to support the mission of the department.
Okay.
Yep. And a whole lot more.
Yeah. And Byron, that's Phil is director of philanthropy. So Phil's, spearheading a lot of the fundraising and partnerships and programs and stuff like that, based on the directives of the foundation.
Okay. Is there any my gears are turning as you're talking about how all the conservation initiatives work and all the private land ownership, because unlike in a lot of the rest of the US where that is not the case, I also live in a country where it's the vast majority is private land ownership. So there's a lot of parallels there. Is there any examples of exciting projects that are ongoing or have happened recently that you could give us an example of the kind of work that you get involved in?
Well, I know, something the foundation and the department are working on together is the opening of our newest state park, Palo Pinto Mountains State Park, which is up near Fort Worth. So very exciting to be so close to a major metro area.
And that's the first state park in 25 years to be open.
Oh, wow.
So that's huge.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yep.
When is that scheduled to open?
So there's going to be a soft opening here, and then we're hoping for the grand opening next year in 2024.
I was very insistent that because we're in the centennial of our state parks this year, and so we needed to open up Palo Pinto this year.
I agree.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm pretty close to Fort Worth, so I'll try to be there for the soft opening as well.
Fantastic. We'll keep you updated.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you talk about the establishing of because I think this is probably quite important to explain for people, particularly outside the US, although I imagine there's quite a few people in the US who probably don't understand this either, is there are parks and there are parks. You've got a lot of different designations. So how does that work, and how do the restrictions work, and what avenues of funding does it make available depending on what kind of conservation area, more broadly speaking, it is? Because you're not
Yeah.
talking about national park. You said state parks. I'm just making sure people are clear in their minds, particularly
State
if they're
parks.
outside the US.
Yeah, thanks for that, Byron. Yeah, it's state parks. I mean, that's in our wheelhouse. We do obviously have national parks and national seashores in Texas, but what we're talking about is the state parks. But you bring up parks versus yeah, I think for us it's about getting people outside. And so while the department is busy opening up state parks and state natural areas and wildlife management areas, we also have programs that fund local parks within, counties or cities, because, the important thing is to support those entities that can get people outside as well and recreating. So really, if you think about local parks to state parks to national parks, we're involved with that full continuum. A good example also, you were out in the Trans-Pecos out in Big Bend. We have our Big Bend Ranch State Park, which is right next door to the national park, and we're looking at opportunities to bring us even closer. And so when we find those opportunities to work together, it just enhances and amplifies the potential impact for recreation and conservation, right? Because conservation is an important part of what we're looking at when we bring on new natural areas, state natural areas or state parks. Um, and Palo Pinto is a perfect example of that. The physical footprint in the state park is very small, and the rest of it is left into its kind of natural setting. And I think that's a lot of the ethic that parks, over the last 20 years have really tried to become, is a smaller physical footprint.
Mhm.
And so
So
we're employing that.
so what kind of like active management projects are ongoing in some of these cases that are helping to facilitate some of the conservation, rather than just designating a safe space, if you like?
I'm looking at Katie here. Are you talking about like the science behind it, or?
Yeah, anything that is helping the understanding and facilitation of. So if I'm thinking of like the protection of, for example, sagebrush habitat by pulling out trees that are encroaching
Oh,
is an
yeah.
active management principle, based on a type of ecosystem that we want to protect. There is one of the conservation mindsets that exist is fence it and keep people out, and it'll take care of itself. Whereas a lot of what you've been talking about is having people within areas, recreating within them, and I'm assuming active management as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, here at the department and also with our NGO partners, right? I mean, what we're looking at is getting the land back to its native condition. So that may involve, as you're saying, in our case, pulling out juniper or cedar, um,
Mm-hmm.
planting native grasses, right? Prescribed burning, which is an important part of returning the landscape back to its native condition. So all that happens within our state parks, within our wildlife management areas, happens on private lands as well, which is critically important, as I mentioned earlier.
And I imagine that it happens at really small scale and then large scale as well. I was talking to some superintendents at state parks last week, and all of them in some way are pulling invasive species, whether that's having a volunteer group of 10 people come in or the entire work crew they have at the park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Byron, before we switch topics or anything like that, David, I think not to have to dig into any details, but I think it's important to kind of mention, the side of the work that the department does that I think is often overlooked, and that's the difficulty in both patrolling, open waters, right, and fishing areas in the Gulf of Mexico, and also along the Texas border, and that you guys work a lot with Border Patrol and things like that. So maybe just talk a little bit about that side of the work that you guys have to do is really a very tall order in terms of wildlife management, anti-poaching, law enforcement, in a huge state with with border, an international border, and also water patrol.
Yeah, so that's you're starting to get into my comfort area there, Tyler. When we start talking about the coast, I came to Texas Parks and Wildlife from the Hart Research Institute for Gulf of Mexico Studies at Texas A&M in Corpus Christi, which the mission was to really bring the science, both the natural and the human behavioral economic science together and looking at coastal and ocean issues in the US, Mexico, and Cuba. And so really kind of this holistic approach to, developing the science, doing the science and providing the solutions. And, what we see in working with when I was there, working with our partners here at the department, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, is that, there's a lot of space there. There's a lot of water, and there's a lot of area to cover. And our game wardens, all 550 of them, they cover the 254 counties along with the out to 9 nautical miles in the Gulf of Mexico and beyond, working with our federal partners. And the challenge is to be able to cover all that area. Now, over the last handful of years, technology has helped a lot, drone technology in particular in enforcement, but it's still a real challenge, especially when we have individuals from Mexico coming into the U.S., as an example, and fishing for red snapper, taking that red snapper back to Mexico, and then trying to get it back across the border into Texas and sell it to restaurants. And so there's this challenge of trying to manage not only the illegal fishery that's happening, but also, the illegal importation of those fish that were originally caught in Texas. So it's a very dynamic situation, especially along the border with Mexico, and it's a lot of water to cover, as Tyler mentioned.
And what about the kind of poaching issues inland? Is that a major issue, or is it less so because you have so much private ownership?
Yeah, no, it still exists, and the challenge there is that you'll have poachers that get onto private lands, and white-tailed deer is a perfect example. Unfortunately, a lot of there will be poaching that takes place on private lands when the landowner might be an absentee landowner, so they don't know that's even happening. And so, that's where the game wardens step in with their investigative units and just the county game wardens and having relationships in the community is critical to be able to do effective enforcement, because people will let hey, something's not quite right, down at rancher X's property. And so, having those relationships in the community for people to share that information is important.
One of the things you mentioned was the importance of making available and encouraging people to recreate in the great outdoors. One of the discussion points that comes up quite a lot, and it particularly came up over COVID, with encouraging people to, or the access of people to national parks, is the one that I'm thinking of in particular, and the weight of footfall in some places. How do you balance encouraging people and more people? I mean, we all want more people to appreciate the great outdoors and nature, but at the same time, not negatively impact it?
So I'll start off, then I'm going to hand it off to Katie, because you bring up something really interesting there, Byron, is that when COVID happened, the national parks shut down. In Texas, the state parks stayed open. So we saw a tremendous increase in usage of the state parks because the national parks that exist in Texas were shut down. And so we stepped in as best as we could. But you're right. I mean, the demand for outdoor activity, recreational opportunity continues to increase. And I'm just going to throw out one figure, and I'm going to have Katie jump in here, is that we're going to have, by the most aggressive figures, which I believe, 25 million more Texans here by 2050. Mm-hmm. That we're at 30 million today. So you can imagine the impact on the landscape, but then also the increased demand for hunting, fishing, camping, backpacking, bird watching activity is going to grow tremendously. And so that's a front of mind for me. And I know for Katie as well.
Yeah, I think a huge part of that is education and awareness. That's what we're trying to do through Stewards of the Wild, is help educate people about the outdoors. And we want you to get outdoors, but we also want you to become a conservation leader and teach other people how to responsibly use, our natural resources. So I think that's a huge piece. And I think that's a huge challenge as well, especially as the population increases so rapidly.
Yeah, and I think that aligns nicely, what we see kind of really today's hunter, angler, outdoor recreationist, aligning obviously with Stewards of the Wild and their mission, but also, Modern Huntsman is, that's where we want to take that. They're not only, using the resource, they're conserving the resource. Mm-hmm. They're helping restore it when it's degraded, mm-hmm. right? That's the ethic that we want to encourage.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, it's a good opportunity to expand on Stewards of the Wild, but just before we get to that, how do you then, with that burden, that extra human burden on the landscape, how do you then fund the facilitation of the extra infrastructure that you need to support those people? Where does that funding come from? If we're looking at an extra 25 million people, you can't look after those people in the great outdoors unless your funding also increases.
Right. And I think that's where the foundation will come in, and other partners and private philanthropy comes in, and you have to lean on that, because you can't just depend on state funding, unfortunately.
And a handful of years ago, Byron, we had passed in the state a constitutional amendment that dedicated part of our sporting goods, or all of our sporting goods sales tax, to the department for land acquisition, operations, et cetera, for state parks. And that wasn't in existence before.
So is that just in Texas?
Well, I don't know about other states. If other states have something similar, but this was new to Texas.
Okay.
In terms of this dedicated funding. And that's a game changer. And it's only really in the last couple of years that we've had the funds to be able to do that. So because of that dedication, let me give you an example. We're going to be able to open, starting with Palo Pinto later this year, open a state park or state natural area about one every 2 or 3 years. And so
that's incredible.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's a game changer. But remember, we're going to have 25 million more people here by 2050. Yeah. And so that while that's great, we also need to get busy and start thinking about additional opportunities.
And there's some other initiatives that people are working on, like RAWA and, some others. But as for now, that's what we have.
I think, Katie, to switch or dive a little bit more into Stewards, I know I gave a very brief kind of overview, but I think that obviously this ties into the story we had in volume 10, but maybe just give us a little bit more of a detailed rundown of, the program with Stewards of the Wild, and then, how the chapters work independently, but then also collectively, and just some of those details of the type of events and things you guys put together.
Sure. Thanks, Tyler. So Stewards of the Wild is a program of Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation. And our mission is to get young professionals aged 21 to 45. We won't check your ID though. Outdoors and engaging with conservation. And not only that, but creating a pipeline of conservation leaders through Stewards who can then help engage other people, whether that's their friends, their family, or strangers in the outdoors and conservation. And so it was started in 2013 by the foundation, and there are chapters across the state. So we've got chapters in most of the major metro areas like Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, Houston. And then we've got some in Abilene, Midland. We've been talking about perhaps a Corpus Christi
Soon
chapter.
of Corpus Christi, yes. We need to do that. Coastal. We need a coastal chapter.
I agree. And then we've got a statewide chapter too for the individuals who are not in a major metro area, so they can still stay involved. And so the chapters put on events, and so does the statewide program. And the events range from social networking events like happy hours to outdoor events like paddling the Devil's River for 5 days, dove hunts, duck hunts, fishing opportunities, camping trips, hiking, birding trips. They really range. There's a wide range there, but they're all so much fun. Everyone is so welcoming. Everyone is there for the same reason. That's because they care about the outdoors. So that's really what Stewards is. And let me know how else I can expand on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, Katie, all those things, listing such a diverse range of ways to interact with the outdoors is very unique. And obviously it's very similar to our mission as well, right? Trying to showcase and provide points of access for people of all different backgrounds and histories and all those kinds of things. Because people, there's a lot of different ways people like to engage with nature. And I think that, me having a girlfriend who's, only recently gotten into hunting in the last year, I know that the atmosphere in the community at Stewards of the Wild is something that really kind of clicked a light on for her to think that, there was a group of people that she could go, to with your season, the Dove Opener kickoff, the event you guys had at the Beretta Gallery in Dallas. Going to the store and she got to meet a lot of interesting young people. And I think she got maybe 4 or 5 offers to be for someone to mentor her, right? Or to take her out on this or to take her out on that. And I remember at the end of the event, she was like, okay, well, I don't know what you've got going on this year, but I've got several hunts planned.
I love that.
And so I think that, we talked about it a little bit in the interview we did with you online, but I think that that's such a great focus and really probably isn't something, it's something you could have hoped for, but it's not something you can sit down and make an outline for, like, hey, here's how these people are going to make these connections at these events. So maybe just talk a little bit about that side of it and sort of the organic social evolution and development that's happened as a result of that.
Sure. So, we have our formal mentored hunting program, which is fantastic. And that's what it's made for, to get people who either have no experience hunting or they used to hunt when they were little, but have no clue how to do it on their own as an adult. So we have that. But then, there's this beautiful organic thing that's happened where everyone just wants to help each other. And if they meet someone who doesn't have experience, but they're interested, they want to take them, say it's duck hunting. For example, I went on my first duck hunt just recently here a couple months ago, or a month ago, and it was incredible. There were all these people there, even though I'm the one overseeing the program, they still wanted to just help me figure out how to duck hunt and, get it done and learn something and have fun while I was doing it. But it's incredible. The people that are involved, they're just so generous.
I'm just wondering whether, if you're not from Texas, whether you can become a member, because it looks freaking awesome from all the people I know who are involved.
I had that question, Byron, yesterday before, and I was like, well, I want to say yes, but I don't know how you'd come to the events. I want to say yes.
Oh, I got no problem. There's planes.
Yeah. You
and
want
I
to
got
come
a
fly down to
passport.
the Dove opener in Albany? Come on, you're welcome. Everyone.
Okay, well, I'm gonna hold you to that because
Yeah.
it's after reading Jillian's story, and then obviously I knew a little bit anyway from Tyler and speaking to Phil too. It just seems brilliant, and what an amazing atmosphere and camaraderie between people, encouraging and very willing to help, which is so nice to see.
Well, Byron, I've got a seat for you. So
Okay. Done.
Yeah, Byron's an honorary Texan, and he's over quite a bit. So
I leave my cowboy boots at Tyler's house. So.
Yes, he has some boots that live in my closet. But no, I think to touch on that story a little bit, Katie, Jillian, who wrote the story, and our friend Kristen, who photographed. Jillian's obviously a very experienced outdoors woman. She lives in Idaho, and they train their own bird dogs and hunt that and hunt elk and make jewelry and all kinds of things. So it was interesting to send her in. And there's a funny quote from the story where when she was meeting people and members of Stewards of the Wild, and they had asked her if she'd ever been dove hunting before, and she said yes. And they go, well, but have you ever dove hunted in Texas? And she said no. And they said, well, you've never been dove hunting then. And so I think that the element of there's something that can just be considered an activity versus there's something that has an incredibly rich history and tradition around that's become, it's become its own flavor and its own spice. And I think that was really amazing to see her enter into this and be like, she was like, what the heck is a kolache, and what the heck is a Texas Christmas? And so to have everybody sort of energetically and wholeheartedly trying to show her the best possible time, but also positive light on what it's all about. And obviously everybody has a different opinion of that, or everyone has different memories. But maybe, I think, you got to meet her, right?
Yes, of course. She's amazing.
So I think that side of it too is, Stewards, I think, has a really unique, I don't know if swagger is the right word, but there's like a, sort of a personality to this organization that I think is rare beyond, some of the other bigger conservation organizations and things like that. And I think that goes a long way into ultimately pointing towards, David and the department's goals of having more people recreate and get in the outdoors. If there's a cool group, a cool organization of young people having a good time, what better way to try to attract and get people out into these state parks and access areas?
Right, exactly. And I do want to say, I think sometimes people are intimidated by Stewards of the Wild because they think everyone in the group is an expert or, has 20 years plus of hunting experience, which is not true. It's so welcoming to everyone, whether you have experience or not, or you are just moved from, Maine, or you have lived in Texas for 25 years. So I just want to make sure people understand it's open to everyone, and we will welcome you.
Yeah. And I think, it's low cost in terms of, kind of, the physical and emotional investment, right? I'm not talking about the dollars. It's like, come as you are. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Come as you are. There's a community here around you that's willing to take you in and help you get where you want to go. And, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's my own story, right? I mean, I grew up, backpacking, camping, fishing, but I didn't start hunting until I was up in the Panhandle at Tech. And it was somebody that, and Stewards of the Wild wasn't in existence there, but it was somebody that just mentored me, said one day, David, you want to go dove hunting? I said, absolutely. And then it just, went off the rails from there. Yeah. Right.
No going back.
Yeah. But it's somebody that just says, hey, come with me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the nice thing, not that I've done it, but I've done hunting that is similar in fashion to the sort of the community involvement of a dove hunt, where it's quite relaxed. You can have conversations. You don't have to be quiet. You can tell stories, and and partake in the activity at the same time. So it's very much about the people that you're with as much as it is about the thing that you're doing. I think it's a brilliant stepping stone into that world, is something like a dove hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
When am I going on my next dove hunt, Tyler? That's a real question.
Yeah, we'll work on that. We might have trouble because we're going to be back in Scotland in September this year. So
okay.
We'll figure something out though.
But there's splits there, there's seasons run, there's a split and then another second half of the season, in late December and January. Although it's the opening weekends that are the big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I know he's talking about. He wants to be there for the big group get together and the dancing and the dinners and all that kind of stuff. So
I was just going to say that I was just reading down the email to just see if there was some stuff that I'd missed out, and I noticed at the bottom, I think this is very impressive, so I'm going to read it out, that since 1991 that the foundation has raised more than $235 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That's staggering.
Well, I will say, and I mentioned this, the foundation had their board meeting last week, and at the dinner that evening, they asked me to say a few words, and I was very sincere about this when I said, one of the important factors in my consideration of becoming the executive director of Texas Parks and Wildlife was the existence, not just the existence, but the impact that the foundation has had not only on the department, but on the conservation space in Texas. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, having that level of commitment from the team at the foundation, from the board members, mm-hmm. from those that give to the foundation, gave me comfort in that there's a lot of people that are pushing down the same road, and made my decision easier. Not that the decision was going to be difficult, but it just gave me more comfort.
Of course,
for sure.
Of course. Yeah, and the foundation has had excellent leadership on the board side and the staff side for many, many years. I can't take much credit there, and it's.
Well, you're an important part of that, Katie. Yeah, with what you're doing is hugely impactful.
Thanks. It's really impressive though, and it gives me hope too.
Yeah.
A question to both of you would be, what do you see as the kind of biggest challenges and or threats in Texas, obviously because that's your focus, but more broadly, if you'd like, to being able to protect wild spaces and the ecosystems and have landscape scale management at the same time as having people in the landscape and enjoying it? And I think that that's one of the things that I find so rich and refreshing about the work that you guys do, is that that's at the core of it, because so often the discussions when we talk about more broadly conservation around the world, I've been seeing a shift. It's not something that's new. It existed decades ago, but I've been seeing a shift definitely back towards this very protectionist view that excludes and in fact extracts people from the landscape, which is the exact opposite of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, Byron. Yeah, putting up fences and walls and keeping people out rather than
it's like
them in. Yeah,
it's it is the John Muir view of the world. Well, that's where a lot of that sort of came from, and we see it still happening today in Africa. I see it happening 10 miles from my doorstep here. That's much more to do with carbon sequestration than it is about ecosystem management at all. But where large areas of land are being bought up, they put fences, they kill all the deer, they plant the trees, and they kick all the people out. Mm-hmm. And there's not really any place for recreation there. There's certainly no protection of, if you want to call it cultural heritage, when it comes to what we would call field sports, you're hunting and fishing in that landscape. So I'm curious to know what kind of threats you see for that in Texas, and if you're concerned, and any measures that are, I suppose the work that you're doing are the measures that are in place to try to protect that, but is there something that is of particular concern that either of you see?
So, I would go back to where we started this conversation, and that's the background that both you and I share on the economics. and the value. And for me, it's about how do you create a vested interest? And I'm not talking about putting your dollars down, but how do you create a vested interest and ask somebody to be a conservationist if they aren't connected to the landscape? And so when you put up the walls and you put up the fences, you're asking somebody to do something that they have no connection to. And here in this state, we take absolutely the opposite. And I think most of the U.S. conservation community is of the like mind. Most, not all, that you want to get people on the landscape. You want to get them their hands in the soil, so to speak. You want to get their feet and their fingers dirty. Because then you ask them, okay, you've enjoyed this. It's important to you. Now step up, right? And we need to, Texas, 25 million more people here, going to be highly urbanized. That growth, more potential disconnection from the landscape. It's going to take a lot of effort to get them fully connected. But we can't put up walls. We can't put up fences, and then expect a different result out of individuals when it comes to conservation.
Yeah, I think a lack of hands-on education is a real threat. And someone like me, I just got lucky, who has a father that's obsessed with the outdoors and took me from the time I was 6 months old, took me fishing and got my hands dirty. I got lucky, but so many people don't have that.
Yeah.
And we don't have any formal education system that allows people to do that unless they already are interested in it. And, you don't have to want to go hunt. You don't have to want to go fish, but you need to understand it and care about it.
Yeah. It's so important. I mean, vested interest is the gateway to caring about the world around you. Exactly. And the only way you can do that is if you've got your feet on the ground. And David, you mentioned this. We didn't really dig into it, but towards the start, which is kind of connected to this, which is that how do we value landscapes and how do we value the natural capital that is within those landscapes truly? Because I think if we actually had better systems for valuing that, a lot of our problems would go away because we'd realize how much we would lose. We only really understand dollar amounts, but how much we would lose if we don't care for it. So some of that challenge is making people appreciate what the true value of our natural capital is.
You're absolutely right. I think this would be a great other, segment, or not segment, but another opportunity for a podcast just to dig into that.
Oh, I'm totally down with that. It's one of my like areas of interest. So we can do that another time.
A lot of time talking about that for sure. I think for me, and I've been, Byron, I've been trying to do this effectively for 2.5 decades. And it's tough. When you start talking about humans and human behavior and their connection to landscapes, the natural resources and the environment, it's tough. But you're right. I mean, so many decisions are made based on the dollar, the yen, the euro, the pound, whatever it might be. And a lot of the natural side of things is left out of those conversations because it's hard to value, right? It's hard to put the dollar, the yen, the pound, euro, et cetera. And so, the natural side needs a voice. And, we're better off today in trying to do that with our tools, but it's still a difficult job. I've been working on it for, like I said, for over 2.5 decades. And I, as an economist, and I think you would appreciate this too, I think we have to be very careful about, when we do that kind of work, that we're very comfortable in the values. If we're going to go ahead and put a dollar value out there, we're comfortable in sharing those values, that we can, we have it backed up by strong methodologies and strong science, because the last thing we want to do is have it, be torn apart because of, sloppy work. And I've seen plenty of sloppy work out there.
Oh, there's lots of it. Yeah. We all need to take a leaf out of Bhutan's book where they value their their national wealth through natural capital, I think.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So I would encourage us to have another conversation. Definitely.
Let's do it.
On this topic.
Let's do it. Tyler, is there anything? I know we at the end there we've kind of gone a little off topic, but that is how the next podcast is going to start. I think we found our hook. Is there anything that we've
perfect?
Anything we've missed out, Tyler, that we wanted to try and cover on this show?
I don't think so. I think that obviously, I would encourage listeners to read the story, right, in Volume 10 about the tradition of dove hunting in Texas. Obviously, it's in print in Volume 10, then it's online now as well. But I think that, Katie, is there anything in the coming months or this year that you're particularly excited about? And now that we've officially on the record established that people not in Texas can be Stewards members, perhaps there's some listeners who might want to be honorary Stewards and come to these events. So is there anything coming up in the near future?
Yeah. I think two things I'm very excited about this year. This year is actually the 10th anniversary of the Stewards program. So that's huge. And we've got a Devil's River paddling and fishing trip coming up in April that I'm incredibly excited about. It's going to be a 5-day, 4-night guided trip with Fatties on the Fly, one of the remote areas in Texas. And I'm excited. I've never been down there. So that's happening. We've still got some spots left if anyone is interested. And then, of course, we've got our dove opener on September 8th and 9th, which I'm very excited about. 10th anniversary, go big or go home. We're going to have 200 hunters out there in Albany this year. It's going to be a great time. Awesome opportunity to meet other people who are like-minded and interested in some of the similar things that you might be interested in. So I'd encourage anyone out there who's interested to come make the trip to Albany in September.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It looked like a good time. I wish I could have been there.
We missed you.
I know.
Try to make it this year if you can.
I will. Yes.
But we'll FaceTime you in.
I think that would be worse. Like, look at all the fun you're missing.
Yeah.
Well, David, Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. I understand it much better than I did when I went into this conversation, which is brilliant. And I'll stick all the links for how to find all of the different things that we've talked about in the show notes, so people can click through and read more if they want.
Right, it was great.
Thank you, Byron.
Yeah, it was great being here. Thanks, Tyler and Byron.
Absolutely.
And we'll definitely do a podcast part 2 at some point.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you both to that. I'm going to say, hey, let's get on scheduling this a few months from now, just so that we can get it on the official record.
Yeah, well, maybe we can do it in person, Tyler. When I'm in Texas. That's better. Let's do that.
Yeah, I think so. David, Byron's going to be over here in the spring in March, so maybe we'll take a trip down to Austin and come do it in person.
That'd be great. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.